Good evening. How are you? It's a little bit more than an hour before the debates get underway, or debate gets underway. And it's gorgeous out right now. The trees have got this evening light. I mean, look at that. Isn't that amazing? And if that doesn't wash away how one can be distraught about what's going on in our workaday life, nothing can. The temperature's 85, so I'm not walking at my peril today. The wind is low, 3 or 4 miles an hour, and I thank Thomas Jefferson for keeping track of all these things for us. The debates present a certain kind of disbelief about even how we talk about the debates. Those of us who study such things or get curious about them when we're younger or have it foisted upon us have perhaps read portions of the Lincoln-Douglas debate. Many of us saw and heard the Nixon-Kennedy debate. Two kinds of debates that were powerful. You know, we talk about it, the Kennedy one, that because he looked better, that may have helped him and so forth. But there's no question that they participated in a real debate. And over the years, it's become more like a circus, like it's an entertainment instead of a significant and important civil duty to explain what you're doing. And I listened to the host talking about the issues. But is that really what's moving the voters? And if the issue is something that cannot be trusted to remain as dedicated once elected, what do the issues mean? So in a confrontation like we have with Trump and Biden, we're going to assume, if we've watched these men over the years, we're going to assume we're going to more likely get truth from Biden and have to be on defense that we're going to get only lies from Trump. Now, we've talked about this from time to time. I mean, 1984 and Huxley's book and that kind of writing is in part about removing the safeguards for thought and political and personal action by removing, say, words from our vocabulary. And I've talked about a couple that you may or may not agree with, but for example, climate change instead of global warming to avoid responsibility for what is obviously before us. The language that we use can dictate the beliefs and the positions that we take. So I think when we talk about issues and they're bandied about, I think for Biden it means more. I think for Trump it's just a mechanism to get from point A to point B. Now, in terms of how I think I would approach this if I were the candidate, and how one approaches something like a debate, it's got to involve who you are and your character and things like that. But one of the things I've started doing over the years is I may come to something prepared and having thought about it. Maybe I should put it another way. I'm so compulsive. Well, and I follow these things, and I like following these things. So I come with a certain amount of what I believe is information. You know, I've gone through it and looked at it. And so if I come to a meeting or an appearance or a discussion and I'm a guest, then how do I conduct myself? And over the years, I've decided that I try to practice non-attachment, meaning I don't come to say set pieces. I come having thought about the issue. I listen to the question, and I allow the questioner to direct me to a response that I think seems right. But that's the non-attachment. There's an old saw about how politicians at a press conference use the question as an excuse to say whatever they want. But we all know they didn't answer the question. And where's the fun in coming to a discussion or a debate and not saying what you think? Now, does your job depend on it? Well, if you think that way, maybe you shouldn't be in that job. Whether it be an elective job or a corporate job, or you're running the school choir, whatever it is. So, could Biden come there and practice non-attachment? You see, Trump, to some extent, he does come that way. And I've wondered if my thinking about it has more to do with the fact that I did some acting and public speaking and so forth. That's how I got to who I am today, I suppose. And originally, like some others, I would prefer to memorize something. Didn't trust myself to speak, inspired in the moment. Now, inspired in the moment means you also prepare for it. Okay, so we go to this thing today that you're going to have heard probably by the time you hear me speak here, so you can compare what I say to what happened. Trump is going to look for opportunities to create the chaos. And he creates chaos, and then he tries to superimpose his order on that chaos. And it could be as simple as the Fox two-step, which is to shout over your adversary. But that's one of the things that's going to happen. So the issues don't matter as much when a candidate is calculating what to say and doesn't mean to stand by what is said. So that's number one. So are we wasting our time when we're talking about issues and what Trump believes? Yes, and if he chooses a line of argument that favors his people, whom he already supposedly has, then he's less effective. But if he appears to be more mature, which I don't think is possible for him to remain that pose for 90 minutes. Now, Biden, on the other hand, if he says something about an issue, it's more likely to be true entirely. You have to listen to how they say it. So when we talk about this debate, if it wasn't in the times of Lincoln Douglas or Nixon Kennedy, very formal, if it wasn't a game, it is now a game with very serious consequences, because we think we understand the power of TV, of social media, the power of words, included or excluded. And what's happened is, on top of all of that, our election is a game because it's twisted in its equity by the Electoral College, meaning that the Electoral College takes our system and gives more weight to states with fewer people, and so the system is gamed to those votes in the Electoral College that can help you win in the Electoral College while you lose the popular vote. Also, the process, it's opaque to the truth, because when people are lying, do we know about the misconduct? No, we don't always. Now, a good rule in the case of Trump is never to believe anything he says except an admission. Not so with Biden. So these are the things that are going to be at play today. I think if Biden can relax and enjoy the fight, because he's prepared for it and thought about it and done enough of these that he should not be nervous in any respect. This is a man on a large stage who every day is dealing with very many people, very many sources of information, and trying to figure out how to make it all work. So those are my final thoughts before I actually see and hear the debate in about 40 minutes or so, by which time I expect to have finished my walk and to be listening to it. Now, there are a couple of things at the Supreme Court I think I should mention. One is that the court decided 6-3, and we'll talk about who those 6 are. 6-3, that the government can call up social media and say, I really wish you'd take that down. It could be about COVID, it could be about something else. And Republicans wanted to stop the government, if you will, from enlightening those in social media who are saying false and perhaps misleading things, therefore, about conduct that could be dangerous, about, say, how serious COVID is or what medication one should take or not take. Now, the vote was 6-3. So how could there have been 6 conservative votes for this? Well, there wasn't. There were 3 conservative votes against it: Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch. So that means Roberts and Barrett went with the 3 so-called liberals, common sense associate justices, to say that the government can complain to social media. Is that a win? I think that's a win for intelligence, for fair play, for a correct outcome. And it helps us identify the core of the court that is dead wrong and will continue to be. And you notice Thomas and Alito are among those 3. Gorsuch is, well, he's an interesting one because he sort of lives his mother's dreams, now getting to attack the EPA that her reign and that administration helped her to compromise. Now, another decision was in Idaho that there can be an abortion in emergency cases. So what's going on? Well, every dog has his day. I would like to refer back to Franklin Roosevelt, who attacked the court because they weren't passing and approving his programs. And he talked about packing the court with additional justices to even out the resistance to his programs. And apparently just saying that seemed to make a difference. And then the decisions modulated, and FDR in the meantime took a lot of criticism for it. We're in a different world today, obviously. So the question is, could we possibly imagine this Supreme Court is listening? And I think the answer is that they're not. I think it's more likely that the most conservative members are looking for ways to appear to be balanced so that they can screw us on the immunity clause that permits, if the Republicans have their way, that permits Trump to shoot somebody and kill them in Times Square. Finally, even though today is relatively more comfortable in terms of temperature, we have to think about the heat. And the heat is great around the nation. But I saw a picture of a 10-year-old, Michael Mullinax, in Kansas City. And he's looking into the mist that is cooling him and other kids while the temperature is 100 degrees in Kansas City. So it's a wonderful image of youth and dramatic effect in the middle of a difficult crisis. And I suppose that what we talk about, well, a crisis may be more important to talk about than a lot of other things. Because Aristotle thought that in art, there were basically two styles. There was the tragic and the comic. Now, it's not exactly the way some might think. Tragic is when the protagonist fails. Could be a character flaw, could be any number of things. But the drama is defined by what happens to the protagonist and the circumstances. So what's a comedy? What is comic? What is comic is when the protagonist succeeds, perhaps despite some character flaw. And that defines our newspapers. I don't mean this in a bad way. What we look at are the tragedies. That's the news. The car we're passing that has the hood up and clouds of mist arise from an overheated engine. That's what we look at. And I think it's in part because intrinsic to our corpuscular structure is the destiny that someday we're just going to stop. We won't, quote, exist. And so we look for that in other things. What I want to look for tonight is the comic character of Biden. That however he brings together the aspects of issue, of leadership, of the worthless opponent that brings him to this stage in the first place. Whatever faults or compromises he has that one could point to, none of which are defects in character, in my opinion, that he prevails. He prevails tonight, and it signals he will prevail all the way through November. Yeah, I want a comedy. I want Disney's happy ending, except I want it in the real world. And I believe it's possible because I've seen it before in my lifetime, and I believe it's possible now. And while this debate is a step in that direction and can be the pivot that determines the whole election, it's not the last word. Biden will never do so badly that we don't have another opportunity. And we have enough runway ahead of us that we can make a difference. So that's what I got, and I say to you good evening on this marvelous, historic evening from my Cathedral of Trees. All the best. Bye-bye.